Let's dive deep into exploring what is data. A data is raw, unprocessed facts, figures, and symbols that have no meaning on their own until they are organized or interpreted. Typically, a data is a representation of an object or a thing that can be seen, feel, or touched, but it does not produce any value. Let's look at some examples of data. Data can be appear in many forms: numbers, words, or sensor readings. For instance, take the numbers 10, 20, 25. On their own, they don't really tell us anything meaningful. They're just numbers without context. And now think about words like red, green, or blue. Yes, they represent colors, but unless we know the situation like colors of the cars or colors on a traffic light, they don't give us much useful information. The same goes for sensor readings. If I just say 32 degrees Celsius, you might wonder, is it the temperature outside, inside a fridge, or in a patient's body? Without context, it's just raw data, not information. Now let's take a look at some of the key characteristics of data. Just like humans have features such as head, hands, and legs that helps us identify them, data also has its own characteristics. First, data usually starts in a raw form. On its own, it does not carry much meaning. It's like having puzzle pieces without the full picture. Second, data is context dependent. In other words, we need to place it in a situation to make it sense of it. For example, the number 20 by itself does not mean much, but if I say 20 marks out of 25, suddenly it becomes useful information. And finally, data can be measured. It may be qualitative, describing qualities or characteristics. So, for example, I like the shirt which is in red, or the class is noisy. Or it can be quantitative, expressed as numbers, like 35 students in the class or 28 Celsius temperature. So remember, data is all about context and meaning. Without context or processing, it's just raw material waiting to become valuable information. Alright, now let's take a look at the forms of data. A data can be in many forms. So for example, it could be text, numbers, images, audio, or video, or it can be a website or a video may contain text, images, video, all mixed together. Sounds familiar, right? Let's move on. Okay, that's all about data. Then, what is information? Let's dive deep into it. So, what is information? Information is what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of data. So, by saying that, we can also say a collection of data can be formed to produce a meaningful information. So, let's take a look at the two examples we have. Imagine a shopkeeper has data about how many fruits they sold: 10 apples, 20 oranges, and 10 bananas. That's just raw data. But when we say oranges are the most sold fruit and have the highest demand, we have turned that data into useful information. So similarly, think about students' marks, so which is 65, 75, 80, and 92. So those numbers are just data points. But if we say the average mark is 78, so the class is performing above the average, we've turned that data into meaningful information. So in short, information is what you get when you give data context and meaning. Alright, Now it's time to put your brain to the test. We are going to dive into some awesome quizzes to see how much you have picked up so far. Let's have some fun and turn what we have learned into a little challenge. A question. What if you hear a news that says today's weather temperature is 32 degrees Celsius and it's a hot day? Don't forget to drink water. Can you identify what is data and what makes information? Alright, let's see if you have answered it correctly. The answer is 32 degrees Celsius is data, which is a raw measurement of temperature. And it's a hot day. This is information. Data is processed and put into a context for decision making. So, were you able to guess the answer correctly? Cheers if you have. But if you have missed, that's fine. Let's try out another one. Alright, another question. If I tell you a cricket player scored 45 runs and 45 runs made him the top scorer of the match, can you identify what is data and what makes information? So the answer is scored 45 runs is data, which is just a raw number. So since he scored 45 runs, he was the top scorer of the match. This is information, data processed and interpreted in context. Alright, we have come to an end. But before we wrap up, let's quickly review what we have learned in this video. So to summarize everything, we learned about data. A data is raw. It could be numbers, words, or sensor readings, but by itself, it doesn't carry much meaning. And we also learned about information. Information is what we get when we process the data and place it in context. So it becomes meaningful and useful. Remember, data is like the ingredients, and information is the cooked meal. Once we organize and give data purpose, it becomes valuable. So, whenever you see data, marks, numbers, colors, or readings, always ask yourself, what does this mean in context? That's when you truly understand the difference between data and information. I just want to end up this video by saying every small step you take today is data. The story of your life will be the information you create tomorrow. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Collect your efforts, give them meaning, and you will create your own success. Thank you so much. See you next time with another video.